Welcome to the Ordinary Marathoner podcast.
Hello and welcome to the Ordinary Marathoner podcast. My name is Scott. I'll be your host today. Guys, I got a great show for you today. I got an incredible guest. Going to bring him on in just a moment. Today's episode is brought to you by Ascension Multisport. Nick Cumbo, Coach Nick Cumbo, and Coach Laura Stebbins over there at Ascension. They are training marathoners, triathletes, you name it. Got a great little operation going on over there. They're big supporters of the Ordinary Marathon. If you're a listener to the podcast, you can get a big discount on a coaching package through Ascension Multisport. You can reach out to me. You can reach out to Nick at Ascension Multisport directly. You can reach out to Laura. All of them are very visible over at our discussion group if you're interested. And I know a lot of people have signed on to this deal already and started getting their coaching with Laura or with Nick. And I get some really great feedback, and I'm really glad they're supporting the Ordinary Marathon for us. So if you haven't registered for the Ordinary Marathon, head on over to ordinarymarathon.com. Check that out. Get yourself registered. All the proceeds are going to the SAM Fund this year, which is a charity that's very near and dear to our hearts. We've had Samantha Watson on the podcast before talking about the charity and what they do. It's just really, they do some amazing things for cancer patients, and man, we're really happy to support them. And the race is coming up. It's in late April to early May. We have our 5K on May 5th. You can either participate live first of all, you got to sign up for the Ordinary Marathon. It's a 10-day event. Included in that is our 5K. You can either do that live in Longmeadow, Massachusetts at the Fleet Feet store, or you can do it virtually and submit your time via the website. Either way, it's fine. We look forward to having a blast on those 10 days, guys. So get on over to ordinarymarathon.com and get registered for that race. So you can find this in the back episodes of our podcast at our website. It's called ordinarymarathoner.com. Check that out if you get a chance. You can also find them at aggregators such as Stitcher, TuneIn, iTunes, of course. If you like the show, hit that subscribe button. Never miss a new episode that way. We also love to see you guys review the show. We love those 5-star reviews. Keep those coming. I got to tell you, every once in a while, I take a look and I see some new ones, and it really makes me feel good. It really makes me feel like you guys are out there listening, and that this is a really positive venture for us. And we love doing the show. We love having you guys listen, and we love doing things like the Ordinary Marathon and getting things done. All that, I don't know, just feels good. Watching you guys finish races, all that great stuff. Anyway, what else do we got? Our Facebook group, our discussion group over at Facebook. It's called Ordinary Marathoners. Closed group. You got to add yourself to it, but we'll put you right through. You can join the conversation over there. You can also find me at Twitter at OrdMarathoner. That's ORD Marathoner. Follow me there. I'll follow you back. And lastly, we have our YouTube channel, which is just Ordinary Marathoner. Check it out. We love having new subscribers over there. We lost a few last couple of days. Where'd you guys go? Lost a couple. I think we're at right around 70 at the moment. But could always use a bunch more. We love each and every one of you guys that go over to YouTube and hit that subscribe button. All right, with that, I'm going to bring in today's guest. It's really a treat to have him on the podcast today. I would kind of give him a big intro, but I think we're going to talk about just about everything anyway. So with that, let's just bring in Jeff Galloway. Jeff, welcome to the show.
Great, Scott. Great to be here.
It's great to have you too. Listen, so my friend Scott Frassard kind of hooked this up, and when he reached out to me, he said to me, "Oh, I think I can get Jeff Galloway on the show." And I said, "You mean Jeff Galloway, the Galloway Method guy?" And he's like, "Yeah, that guy." And so I thought about I'm like, all right, that's pretty much what I knew about you. I didn't know too much about you, and then I started Googling you, Olympian, author. And then I found your TED Talk, and I'm like, and I watched it, and I'm going, all right, he's going to talk about run intervals, and you're talking about like the human brain.
Yes.
So you do a lot of stuff.
Well, I have been fascinated by the effects of physical education since I started at a 13-year-old, really overweight kid, lazy, and all that. And running totally transformed my life. So ever since then, I've been trying to figure out what is it that's doing that, and I'm still on that quest.
And it's, it was actually a phenomenal story that you told during your TED Talk. You kind of told that whole story about how you moved from school to school, and and how you sort of found running. And it seems like running sort of straightened you out in a lot of ways. Is that what you would say?
No doubt about it. I was really just drifting as a 13-year-old because I didn't have a good academic background. I had no friends. I was in a new school that was highly competitive and just so challenging to me that I thought I was inferior intellectually. And once I connected up with my running friends on cross-country team, I had instant friends, good friends, friends that supported me and I supported them. And in our talks and arguments that runners get into during runs, I realized that I was not any dumber than they were, yet they were on the honor roll and I was at the bottom of the class. So it totally reset my expectations, but at the same time, the running turned my brain on in several really critical areas. I found myself able to concentrate better, to learn better, and I had no idea what did this. However, when I was given the assignment to write the book Mental Training, I found that out because exercise in general and running in particular to the highest level activates the hippocampus, which is the center for learning, for memory, and for new growth of brain cells, and we all need that.
Yeah, sometimes we kill them off a little bit faster than we think, especially in our younger years. But I definitely would encourage anyone listening, if they're interested, to check out your TED Talk, because it was very, very enlightening. And like I said, I mean, coming into, before I Googled you, I was like, oh, he's just the run, walk, run guy. And how many books have you written? I mean, because I also went to Amazon. I'm like, all right, maybe I'll plug one of his books, and seems like there are dozens of them.
Yes, 31 books now, and all but one are still in print. It's one of these things that my publisher found new topics every year, and it's been going on for quite a while. Right now, I think we're stabilizing, and that's a darn good thing because I've got a lot of great projects out there. I need the time.
Yeah, I was going to say, how do you juggle it all? I mean, it seems to me, we've had a bunch of people on the podcast in the past that we talk about this a lot, about sort of what's the sort of, not dedication, discipline, like how running sort of frames. In order to achieve what your goals in running, in order to run distance, in order to get better, you have to keep working out, and you have to have that discipline to sort of make it routine, to get it to do it over and over and over again. It's it's a task sometimes. And you find that sort of discipline and that sort of disciplined approach when it came to running helps you find time also to write?
Well, before I started running, when I was 12 and 13 years old, I was tired most of the time, physically tired. I had no energy level to speak of. Minor type of exertive task would wipe me out because I had no overall fitness level. What I discovered when I wrote the book Mental Training is that exercise in general, but running to the highest extent, turns on brain circuits for a better attitude, for more vitality, more energy, in other words, and personal empowerment circuit better than anything else that's ever been studied. And this is what I experienced, and it's what I experienced every single day now. I work a lot of hours every day. I work usually between 12 and 18 hours every single day of the year. And it's stuff that I have to continually interact and keep my brain focused on, but I don't have any problem doing that because of my running. I come back from a run, I'm ready to go. I'm ready to spend 3 to 8 hours focused on task and then be able to do other things right after that. It's really part of our being to move, and when we do so, we don't just help the body, we help the brain.
Yeah, and I'm with you on that. So do you run in the morning? Is it a routine for you that you just kind of run in the morning and then start working on stuff for the day? Has it become like a routine like that?
I do some exercise practically every morning. I also like the Elliptigo. I have an Elliptigo bicycle, and I actually have it up on a trainer because I can do it right outside. Our house overlooks this river, and it's just a beautiful sight out there. And I feel like that I'm either cycling or running through a beautiful forest every single morning. So I usually warm my legs up with the Elliptigo, and then I'll either go out on a run right away or a little later in the morning, and there'll usually be one or two other workouts. Now, these are not long workouts. They're usually between 15 and 45 minutes each. But I do get in a good bit of workouts throughout the week.
That's good stuff. And, I got to tell you, like, I have my bike on my trainer in my basement, and I look at a wall or a TV when I ride, and just the thought of having that view is, I think it's always kind of better to be outside when you're doing it. I live in the Northeast, so we get we got the snow and the bad weather, but I definitely am jealous of your river view.
No doubt about it. It really invigorates exercise to be outdoors.
Yeah. So, just in reading about you and reading about sort of your books and your, obviously the TED Talk, the one sort of space that I don't hear much about. Now, you talk about your childhood and how you were 13 and you weren't very athletic. There's this piece sort of in the middle here where you were an Olympian, and I don't hear you talk too much about it. Is that, am I just looking in the wrong spots? Is it just sort of, are you a little bit, not as braggadocious about it, and you're more into helping others these days? Is that kind of why I don't hear it? When did you know that you were not even that running was going to be part of your life, but that you were really good at it?
Well, first of all, I wasn't very good. I struggled badly the first. Actually, I didn't really show any promise to move up to the next level for 10 years. I just worked out. I kept running because it was my social life, and it made me feel better and made me think better, and my grades improved. I knew that the running had something to do with that, but I really didn't show any promise. As a matter of fact, I did not qualify to get into the state championship in the state of Georgia until my senior year. Almost everybody on the Olympic team first year made it to their state championship and usually won the state championship. That was not me. I really worked hard for every improvement that I got. And I found that I received a lot of joy in two areas of running. The first was the achievement from having overcome challenges. And I overcame challenges every single day. And the second was explaining this to others. And even when I was in high school, I did a lot of reading because I was trying to figure out where all these things came from and all the good things came from. And I also wanted to find out what training methods might work better. And I just went over any resource that I could possibly find. I interviewed coaches that were successful. I interviewed athletes that ran faster than I did. And I've continued to do that for my whole life. Now, fast forward, I did not get a college scholarship. I went to a small liberal arts university. Wesleyan University had 1,200 students on board and no scholarships at the school at all. It was academic school and a very good one. Well, the year after I came, another non-scholarship athlete came named Amby Burfoot, and Amby's senior year, he won the Boston Marathon.
Wow!
Only college student that's ever won Boston Marathon.
That's incredible.
And then 2 years later, another guy came named Bill Rogers.
I heard of him.
None of us got scholarships. We came for the academics. We had a great time, supporting one another then and supporting one another now. It's just a wonderful camaraderie. But initially, none of us showed any promise for moving on. I certainly didn't, even as I graduated from college. And we had a thing going on there called the draft. And I won the lottery. My number was 3, and that meant that I was going to go to Vietnam. So I enlisted in a Navy officer program and spent 3 years First part, 18 months off the coast of Vietnam on a ship. And then I lucked out and got assigned to a minesweeper that was in the shipyards at Pearl Harbor. And because of difficulties they were having in the shipyards, that ship never went to sea while I was stationed on it. So I was able to actually get back into running during my second tour in the Navy. And that set me up for thinking, well, I'm improving and I've gotten back up to where I was in college. Maybe I could make something out of this. So in 1970, when I was put on inactive reserve duty status in the Navy, I decided that I was going to try to qualify for the Olympic trials. I had no illusions that I would make the Olympic team, but there weren't many opportunities for postgraduate college athletes. But I found one in my region. It was the Florida Track Club that was just forming, and I became a charter member of that club. We had two really stellar athletes, Frank Shorter, who I had actually run with during my collegiate days. He was at Yale, which was 27 miles away from Wesleyan, and we didn't have an indoor track, and I got permission to go down and train on the Yale track. Well, I happened to be paired up with Frank Shorter, so Frank and I got to know one another early. And then Jack Batchelor, who was actually the founder of our Florida Track Club, Jack had already been on the '68 Olympic team, and he was ranked one of the top 3 distance runners in the world. And we learned so much from him, and I improved very gradually. But even as of 6 months before the trials, I had not qualified yet to get into the trials in either of the 2 events that I wanted to go for. One was the 10K and the other was the marathon. And so I went into a race in February in which I had great atmospheric conditions. The last 10 miles, I had a tailwind of 25 to 30 knots behind me.
Wow. Yeah.
And I not only got my qualifying standard, but I qualified good enough 2:19 in the marathon to be able to get travel expenses. So I was going to go to the trials, and I was really excited about that. I did not qualify for the 10K until 2 weeks before the trials. Meanwhile, 2 months before that, Shorter, Batchelor, and I trained up at Vail, Colorado at 8,200 feet. And I am totally convinced that that gave me that extra push that I needed to qualify for the 10K. And I came down needing a minute and a half PR in the only race that was left to qualify. It was the National AAU Championships, Seattle, Washington. And I improved my PR by 2 minutes in that race. And I'll tell you, altitude I'm a big proponent of at the high level. And got into the Olympic trials, had no illusions I would make the team, but I came from last place during the first mile to second place, and it's the most joyous competitive moment in my whole life.
Nice. So you wound up obviously making the team, coming in second place.
Yes, and what happened after that is actually more remarkable to most folks. My good friend Jack Batchelor, founder of our club, did not qualify in the 10K. He was passed. He was in third place coming off the final curve of that last lap in the 10K. And a runner came by him on the inside, and Jack was so exhausted he was wavering, and he bumped this runner, who happened to be the son of the mayor of Eugene, Oregon, where the trials were being held. And an official disqualified Jack from the race. Now, the significance was that if I had qualified in the marathon 1 week later, I would have dropped out of the 10K so that Jack could move up.
Right.
That was no longer possible. So I paced Jack through the marathon trials 1 week later. And he had 2 problems running against him. One was that he had only run about 17 miles as his longest run, which at that level is just not enough.
Right.
And then the other one is he tended to go out too fast, which of course is disastrous in a marathon. And I have been, from the beginning of my career, a pacing metronome. So I clicked those miles off, and we moved from 100th place at the mile into a tie for third place at 21 miles. And I was Jack's cheerleader and his lookout to make sure nobody was coming up on us. We entered the stadium in a tie for third place, and at the finish line, I dropped back so Jack could be the official qualifier. And I have to tell you, that is one of the most satisfying things I've ever done in my life. And that year, we had the best finish any country has ever had in the Olympic marathon. First, fourth, and Jack was ninth.
There you go. There you go. That's, I tell you, there's a lot to unpack with that story, because it's kind of a great story. But, number one, thank you for your service. My father was a Marine during Vietnam. He was actually stationed in Puerto Rico, so he never saw any action or anything like that. But whenever I hear of, people making that commitment to their country, it's impressive to me. So I want to thank you for that.
Well, I salute his service. I have worked with the Marines in a lot of different cases. I totally respect that branch of service.
Yeah, he'll never let me forget it too. He's got the bumper sticker on the car, and whenever I say my dad was a Marine, he gets mad because he says once a Marine, always a Marine. I wasn't a Marine. Team. I am a Marine. Right? Yep, you are an Olympian.
That's exactly right.
But he's really proud of it, and we're proud of him for it too. And number two is when I think about over the course of the past, we've been doing this podcast for about 3 years, and over the course of the past 3 years, I've probably mentioned your name without knowing who you are about 36 times, because I heard of the Galloway method, and I heard of run, walk, run intervals. And I never knew how scientific it was. And I've employed it myself at times. And here you are, a guy who is an Olympian runner, who, one of your grandest achievements, it seems like, was pacing your friend in the marathon qualifier, so that he could wind up being ninth. And you seem very proud of that. And yet it seems to me that, the run, walk, run method that is so, attached to your name. And we could maybe talk about how you came up with this and all that. But it seems to me that for an Olympian or Olympic level marathoner or distance runner, run, walk, run for example, you're not going to use that strategy within an Olympic trial marathon. You're just not. You'll never finish. But it's something that sort of like more casual marathoner would employ. And maybe I'm wrong. And, maybe I'm wrong. And if I am, you can certainly stop me. But it seems like, you get a lot of pleasure in helping people succeed. Would you say that's fair to say?
Yes, but I will say that you are partially wrong there about fast runners. I ran my lifetime PR of 2:16 using walk breaks. Now, I didn't use them as frequently as I help people with who are training at 10, 12, 14 minutes per mile, but about every 2 miles from the beginning, I pulled off to the side at a water stop and I walked, because I had been using walk breaks on my long runs leading up to that, and I knew that they would help me be stronger at the finish line. And they did. I ran 2 minutes faster than I'd ever run.
Wow.
And I totally credit the run, walk, run from the beginning for helping some of that time improvement. Now, all of that said, my whole mindset about what I get out of running has evolved from that beginning, when I enjoyed telling people about the benefits of running. Even as I made it up to my Olympic team, it gave me a platform to give clinics, and I would explain to average people that they could really improve their lives in so many ways if they did some form of exercise, and that running is the easiest to do for most people because you can do it anywhere. I trained to be a teacher. I wanted to teach. I taught classroom for 1 year right after the Olympics, but classroom teaching was not for me. And so I looked for a venue where I could teach running, and I found it. a running specialty store. I opened my store Fidipides, and thankfully we're still in business, struggling, but we're still in business. And that was 1973 when I opened that store. Early in 74, a guy came in the store to get a pair of shoes who put on a special set of classroom courses for people who were not enrolled in a local university but wanted to learn things. So they were not for credit, but they were learning courses. And he suggested that I teach a course in beginning running. So hoping to get customers in the store, I said, sure. Well, we had 22 that signed up, and all of them made it through the course of 10 weeks and finished either a 5 or a 10K. But right from the beginning, I realized that might not be possible at the end if I didn't put some walking into their runs, because most of them were just totally out of shape.
Right.
So what I did was I divided up into 3 groups based on their current ability. It's very similar to what we use now in our method called the Magic Mile. And I listened for huffing and puffing, and I went out with every group every single week, listening for huffing and puffing. If I heard it, then I made everybody in the group take a walk break until the huffing and puffing stopped. And going through that 10-week period, taking walk breaks in every single workout all the way through, not only produced success in finishing those events, but there were no injuries.
Wow.
I had never been with a group of 20 or more people over 2 months where there were no injuries. And I strongly sensed at that point that Run, Walk, Run had something to do with it. And so from that point on, I started collecting data. I started looking into what amount of running, what amount of walking tended to work best for people at certain paces. And now I have heard back from over 500,000 people. Wow. And this is what drives my method. I average and have averaged for 30 years more than 100 emails a day. And as I go through those, almost everybody has a question that involves a run, walk, run amount. So I will give them what I have currently found to be the best formula, and I keep sorting through that to find what might be working better. And so the results of all of this is what has forged my method. It's based partially on research, but there are a whole lot of areas, particularly with Run, Walk, Run, in which there are no research studies. So I have provided the backup source of that with more than 500,000 responses of success using Run, Walk, Run, my Magic Mile, the pace of the long runs, how much to slow down, how far to run, and then what the evidence is about increasing the length of the long run as to how much faster you can run. Now, one last thing.
Yeah.
You mentioned earlier that the Run, Walk, Run is really not for fast people. Well, I would never try to convince a world-class athlete to put walk breaks in there. But I will say that I've heard from well over 200 people that have broken 3 hours in the marathon by using my method who could not break 3 hours when they ran nonstop. The average improvement when a non-stopper finds the right Run, Walk, Run is more than 13 minutes faster with Run, Walk, Run.
Yeah.
Because you don't slow down at the end.
I tell you, I am with you. I'm actually with you. I'm a convert. And,
Great.
and the reason is, I did, so the first Ironman race I did, there was no running the marathon portion all the way through for me. It wasn't going to happen. And I met a guy on the route, and, he basically said, I can't run it. I'm walking 2 telephone poles and then running 2 telephone poles. And that's what we did. And that's what we did almost the entire time. And we finished in under 6 hours, which, after the swim and the bike, that was pretty good for us.
It is.
Yeah, we were very excited. And then this past year, I did Hartford Marathon, and I set my PR using probably miles, 12 to 25. I used a run walk interval that was set by myself. And the one thing that I'm kind of interested in is, you're mentioning that you have all this data and I believe, I don't know, is there a website out there where you can kind of feed the data in, like your personal data that will spit out sort of like recommended intervals to use?
Absolutely. The book is simple. It's called Run, Walk, Run. And all of my books come autographed from jeffgalloway.com if you're interested, if anybody's interested. But you can also find specific instances of advice like that, like for what pace per mile would be the appropriate run, walk, run strategy. That's also available at jeffgalloway.com.
I'm going to definitely check that out because I feel like, you know what I feel like? Because I feel like I've inadvertently stumbled on your method, and found out that it worked. And now I kind of want to look into it a little bit more. I will say that in the beginning of my running, I was one of these pig-headed guys. And I think what this comes from is years and years of sports and being involved in football, basketball, baseball, where when the coach tells you to run a mile, you run a mile and you don't walk, right?
Yes.
And it sort of gets set into your skull that if you don't run the full distance, you haven't run you haven't run, you can't, how do you say you ran a marathon if you didn't run the full marathon? And then what happens is you start spending time in the sport and you realize like, hey, the people who are walking here are beating you. Right. And all of a sudden there's a lot of it makes a lot of sense, this run walk method. And certainly, we had people, it's one of the more contentious conversations that comes up on our discussion group from time to time is some people think that you need to run the full way to say that they run a marathon, and some people take pride in that. And I got to tell you, I got no problem with that. If you do a run walk, or if you ran 24 miles and you feel like you didn't run a marathon because you didn't run the last two, that's your goal to set. That's your way of looking at it, and that's fine. But I'm certainly not going to take anything away from someone who did a run, walk, run method, especially if they beat me.
Well, let me give you some ammunition in your belief about each person deciding what he or she wants to do. The first thing is that the most empowering thing I've identified about running is that each one of us has the chance to be the captain of our running ship, because we determine the experience that we want on any given day. And so a person who says, well, I don't feel that I have run a marathon if I don't run every single step. First of all, there are very few people that run every step of a marathon. There are almost none, as a matter of fact. The dirty little secret is that almost every single person that tries to run nonstop does a good bit of walking at the end. So it's really your choice. Do you want to be strong at the end, or do you want to be strong at the beginning and walk at the end? And that's usually the trade-off. But going back to the whole philosophical premise here, each one of us is our captain of our running ship. So you determine what you want, but none of us has the right to tell somebody else that they must do this, that, or the other, because each one of us is empowered to make our own decisions about running. That's one of the great things that I have fun with. Occasionally, I will talk to somebody who says, oh, no, you only can run if you want to say that you've run a marathon. Well, I'll say, gosh, there must be a rule book. Could you please show me the rule book? There's no rule book because we are empowered to do what we want to. Second bit of evidence, the first marathon. There is an article in a museum in Athens, Greece, that was written by first-hand account of a reporter that followed all of the marathoners for that initial marathon in the 1896 Olympic Games in the marathon. His quote, every one of those athletes walked significant portions of that marathon. Wow. Walking was done from day one in our sport. And I do believe that we should call those original marathoners true marathoners. Don't you?
Absolutely.
the other bit of evidence comes from a book called The Story of the Human Body. It's written by an evolutionary biologist from Harvard named Daniel Lieberman, who piles up 6 million years of evolution and believes, as do most of the anthropologists I've talked to about early man, that our ancestors did not do very much running. And the reason is that the most common cause of death until very recently was starvation. And they weren't about to run when they would be using up their resources at a rate of 4 to 5 to 1 over walking. So they walked everywhere. And they bequeathed us with an amazing ability to walk hundreds of miles at a time. We're designed to do that. Now, running, not so much. The average amount that most of those anthropologists told me they believe our ancestors did was no more than about 200 yards nonstop at a time. Now, we can certainly train ourselves to go longer and longer, but we're going to pay for that. We're going to pound the orthopedic units and predispose us to more injuries, broken bones, and so forth. We're going to use up our muscle resources so that they get fatigued and cause us to slow down at the end. And we're going to use up energy resources at a much greater rate so that they won't be available at the end of our runs and races. And so to have those resources available when you need it most at the end, the run, walk, run method is as close to a panacea as I have ever found in my 60 years of running.
And I'll stand behind that because when I used that run, walk, run in the Ironman races, I remember those last couple miles, and there were just people struggling, and you could tell they just wanted to run and they didn't want to walk, and they were running 16-minute miles, like they were just trying to continue running, and as opposed to, they could probably have walked faster had they just stopped. But when we're doing the run, walk method the entire way, and you have some energy left, and you look at some of the people that you're passing, and you're like, wow, like why this guy should be doing what we're doing, it just seemed like I don't know, it seemed like every time I've used it, I've felt better at the end of a race than I do when I don't, if that makes sense.
Recover fast, and there's nothing more empowering than passing people at the end of a race.
You're telling me it's incredible. It's an incredible feeling. But yeah, I broke the 5-hour mark using your method and not even knowing how to use your method. So I'm kind of looking forward to getting on that website and checking that out. I got to tell you, Jeff, before talking to you, I spoke to a lot of people who have met you. I think you get out and about quite a bit in the marathon scene, which is one of the reasons why I asked you if you're going to be in Boston. Unfortunately, you were not this year. But everyone, to a person, everyone said that you're like a super nice guy, a great guy to talk to. And I got to say, after talking to you for a good 35 minutes here, I agree with them. And thank you for coming on the show.
Well, I really appreciate your efforts here in getting information out to people. And together, we are working as a team to help people improve the quality of their lives and their running.
I agree. And it's, I get calls every once, and I don't get 100 emails a day, but I do get calls every once in a while, and people saying that, they like hearing what other people are going through and hearing stories that people like you tell when they come on the podcast. And it's just, it's kind of a great community, the running community. It's, I don't know. It's when I look on social media and Twitter and Facebook, it's like everyone supports one another. As people have questions, they always get answers. People have stories. Everyone listens. Everyone kind of pats each other on the back. If people get down, everyone's there to support them. It's, in this day and age when there's so much, you go on social media, almost any other topic you pick, whether it be sports teams, politics, whatever, you're going to find arguing and yelling and screaming. But for some reason, this little niche community, is one of the finer places I've found on the internet out when I meet people. And, I'm sure you see it the same way.
Absolutely do, Scott. And, I want to issue you an offer should you ever want to learn more on an individualized basis. I'd love for you to come to one of my retreats. I go through step by step every aspect of nutrition and training, injury-free running, the ability to have a mental training program and how to deal with that. I know that you'd love it. And if you have any questions from now until whenever it is that you attend one of my sessions, which I hope will be sometime soon, then go to jeffgalloway.com. You've got my email address, but listeners can go to jeffgalloway.com and ask questions from the website.
Excellent. I'm definitely going to be checking out the website. I mean, this sounds really interesting. It might be hard for me to do, like, if it's a weekend, it might be hard because I have a 4-month-old.
I understand.
She keeps me busy, but I'm going to try. That sounds really cool. And especially, it'd be nice to meet you in person, and, definitely, it's something I'd be interested in. So I'm going to check that out and go to your website, jeffgalloway.com. I know at Twitter, you're at Jeff Galloway. Anything else on, that I missed? Is there like an Instagram or a Facebook?
We are on Instagram. I don't have that right in front of me right here, but we are there. Yes.
Okay. Well, I'll definitely get out to the audience and make sure that if they'll know where to get information, and they'll know where to ask questions if they have them. I'm sure they will. A lot of people talk about this. They talk about the run walk method, and they talk about a lot of the stuff that you've come up with. And I think you've done a good deal of work to get people to get up and moving and see that, it's the marathon is a challenge that a lot of people who don't believe they can do it is something that they can do. And, especially when they start thinking, oh, run, walk, run, like that's, maybe I can do that. And next thing you know, they're sub 5 hours. So I think you've done a lot for the running community in that way.
Well, the conclusion that I've gained from having worked with so many hundreds of thousands of people is that almost anyone in our society can finish a marathon if you have the right amount of running and walking from the beginning.
Yep. I agree with you. I agree with you completely. And, I used to look at it as something, it's just amazing to me how far the sport has come when I look at like how I used to approach the marathon when I was a kid in high school or whatever, thinking that I could never, ever, ever run that far. I could never finish it. I could never participate. And, here I am doing it and watching a lot of people, do it now. The stat used to be, less than 1% of everyone in the world to do a marathon. I bet we're getting closer to not being able to say that anymore.
You're right. Although each year, it still is an elite accomplishment.
Absolutely.
It's about 0.1% each year that of the population finishes a marathon.
Yeah, and each individual finish is certainly an accomplishment. I even extend that to half marathons, 5Ks, 10Ks, depending on the person. A lot of people, I think they just don't think they could do it, and they don't even think about trying. And then once they start trying, something about running, it just takes over, especially, I don't know, for some reason I feel like especially once you kind of, get over 40 and you realize you're halfway done, and that was my story.
No, you're not even halfway. I want you to run until you're 100, Scott.
I hope so. The first 100 years, I'll let you know how the second 100 years go.
Good.
I mean, the walk intervals might have to be longer after the first 100 years.
Well, I was actually very selfish when my publisher asked me for a title I hadn't done, and I said, well, I want to write a book called Running Until You're 100 because that's my goal. And I hope to be able to now write a sequel to that.
Yeah, there you go. And I'm sure you're going to get there, man. I'm sure you're going to get there. You are, I don't know. I'm so glad you came on the podcast, and it's my pleasure to have you here.
Great to be here, Scott.
All right, I'll be in touch about that seminar, maybe the retreat, and maybe I'll be able to get to that. Again, the website is jeffgalloway.com. Check it out if you get a chance. Thank you one last time, Jeff, and I think we're gonna call it a day here, and we're just gonna say, when it comes to running, I'm no expert. I'm just ordinary.